you guys notice that the quality is a little bit better. Also, ignore this bump on my face. I scratched it and now I just did it again. Now it's all red.
You made it, oh yeah, you made it, you made it.
What's up everybody, it's Kiara and I am back with another video. Before we get into today's content, I just want to say thank you so much for clicking on this video and I sincerely hope that you watch it all the way until the end. But while I have you here, go ahead and make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell so that you can get notified every time I upload a new video. In today's video, I'm just going to be giving some very honest college advice. In case you didn't know, I'm a senior at Columbia this year studying biomedical engineering. The advice that I'm going to give in this video is, in my opinion, more so geared towards freshmen, but it can definitely be applied to other years of college as well if you are looking for some advice about how to make it to the end. My first tip is don't skip class. This is a really important one. And I speak from experience when I say skipping class is probably one of the worst decisions that you can make, especially as a freshman. For one, you're wasting your money. If you pay for college, if you pay anything for college, it doesn't matter whether you're paying the full amount or paying a fraction of the full amount of tuition. If you don't show up to class, you are wasting whatever money you're spending on your education. You're also doing yourself a disadvantage because at the end of the day, the bulk of the information that you're going to need to know for exams, quizzes, things like that is taught in class. A lot of professors will give homework reading and things like that on the side as well, but you can guarantee that anything that is talked about in class or is in the class notes, class slides, whatever your professor uses, that stuff is for sure going to show up on any type of assessment that you have. So if you don't go to class, you are basically missing out on hearing from the professor firsthand whatever information that you need to know to do well in the class. The last reason why you should really show up to class is because it gives the professor an opportunity to see your face and recognize you a bit more. It might not seem very realistic, but even in classes with, a few hundred people, professors will often take note of who shows up consistently, who participates in class, who, sits in the front row, all of that stuff. They take note of all of that stuff. So if you show up to class regularly and tend to sit in the same spot, it can actually boost your grade because your professor will become familiar with you and they'll see that, you show up to class consistently. My second tip is to show up to office hours. Now, again, just like the first one, this one might seem a little bit obvious, but I promise you it's not. Going to office hours is really important because that is one of the very few opportunities that you're going to get to sit down with your professor face to face. It might not always be one-on-one because there might be other students there, but you get to sit down with them in a more intimate environment than, the normal scheduled class time and ask them questions about anything. It can be about the homework, it can be about what's coming up on the exam. You can even ask them about, their life, their research, if they do something that you're interested in. The big emphasis should be on talking to your professors about something other than schoolwork because that way, again, they get to know you better. And when you do that, professors are more likely to write you letters of recommendation and mentor you in the future if you need something like that from them. Also, something that I've learned from going to office hours is even if you can't show up to every single office hour that your professor has, even just showing up to one once a week or once every other week, or showing up to them at some regular interval is super helpful because the same way that going to class shows them that you're dedicated and shows them that you're committed to their class, going to office hours does the same thing. And especially if you're the only student who shows up to office hours, professors are much more likely to, walk you through homework problems or basically just give you the answers to things if you show consistency and show that you're dedicated to their classwork. My next tip would be to form a study group. So I'm not sure how much this applies to more humanities related majors, but as someone who's doing a STEM major, I can definitely say that study groups have helped me a lot. The two study groups that I have one where it's just sort of me and my friends. We are not all in the same major, so that study group is more so just for accountability purposes. We'll sit in the library or find some space to work all together and just hold each other accountable for getting stuff done. And then I have a second study group, which is just me and 2 other people who are in the same major. So we're typically taking a lot of the same classes, and in that study group we'll go over the homework assignments and things like that for the classes that we're taking together. Study groups are really useful, especially as a freshman, because I promise you, if you are struggling with one of the homework questions, somebody in your study group is gonna know the answer, and vice versa. If somebody else in your study group is struggling with a question, you're probably gonna know the answer to that question. So generally speaking, being in a study group makes doing homework and just like getting through the course a lot easier, because you can bounce ideas off of each other and basically get the answers to whatever it is that you don't understand. My next tip would be to stay ahead of your work. Now, this one is a lot easier said than done, but I can speak from experience when I say that falling behind on your work is something that you should absolutely try to prevent at all times. Once you start falling behind, it's almost impossible to catch up because professors typically tend to move very fast with the material. Every class session, you're basically talking about something new, and they don't typically go back to review any material. So making sure that you stay ahead of your work and, get your questions answered in a timely manner is really important, because like I said, once you start falling behind, it's really difficult to catch up. And, falling behind in one class might lead you to fall behind in another class, and then another class, and then before you know it, you're behind in all of your classes, and all of that just doesn't add up to a very good situation for you, for your professors, for anybody. So just really try to stay ahead of your work. From my experience, I've pretty much fallen behind in my work at some point during every semester of college so far, so I'm really gonna try not to do that this year. As long as you are trying your absolute hardest to stay ahead of your work, or at least be on time with your work rather than fall behind, then I think you'll be in a pretty good spot. My next tip would be to make sure that you take the time to explore different majors. It's really rare that people come into college knowing what they want to study and actually stick to that major throughout their 4 years. I guess I would consider myself as one of those exceptions, because I came into college already knowing that I wanted to study biomedical engineering, but I did consider changing my major a few times along the way. For anyone coming in as a freshman, I would definitely say make sure that you take the opportunity to explore different majors. Even if you think you know what you want to study coming in, your freshman year and sometimes even your sophomore year, depending on what school you go to, that's going to be the only time that you're going to have really to take classes that you're interested in that aren't related to your major. So like for me specifically, I know that this past year and this coming year, all my classes are going to be major requirements, because I have to take them all to be able to graduate on time. And I had a little bit more flexibility during freshman and sophomore years, and I didn't take the opportunity to explore different majors because, like I said, I was pretty certain that I wanted to do BME coming in. So I really wish that I had explored different majors, or at least, taken more classes in other areas besides BME. But as a freshman, you definitely have the opportunity to do that, and I highly recommend that, because you might find along the way that maybe what you thought you wanted to study coming in isn't actually what you're passionate about and the career that you want to have. My next tip would be to prepare yourself for failure. Now, I know this one sounds drastic, and I don't actually mean to prepare yourself for literal failure, like you shouldn't be failing any of your classes, but I mean it in the sense that you probably are not going to get the same types of grades that you got in high school. I know for me, when I first got to college, that first semester when I got my transcript back and saw the grades, I cried for a week at least, because the grades were so much lower than what I was used to. Because in high school, I basically got all A's all the time. I maybe got 1 B in my entire high school career. And so the grades that I got during my freshman year of college were very shocking to me, and I just had a really difficult time processing that the grades that I got were okay. In a general sense, you should definitely be prepared to maybe not do as well as you did in high school, and that's okay. A lot of people think that, getting B's and C's your freshman year is a really bad thing, but it's not. It's a really big adjustment period in your life, and I honestly don't think any jobs or grad schools or anything like that are going to look down upon you for that. As long as once you adjust, you sort of bring those grades back up or show some sort of trend of progression forward, then you'll be fine. But if you end up with, not so ideal grades during your freshman year, definitely don't stress about it because you have plenty of time to make it up as you go along. So the tips that I'm going to give now are more social tips as opposed to academic tips. So first I would say if you have a roommate, definitely communicate with your roommate. Something that my resident advisor had us do when we first got there was create roommate contracts, which basically we would write out boundaries and sort of like ground rules that we had with each other. So that way, if we found that later on during the year one of us wasn't respecting the other's boundaries or we weren't doing something that we said that we would do, it was written down somewhere so that we could go back and reference and say, you agreed to do this and you're not doing it. So I would definitely recommend anyone with a roommate or multiple roommates does something like that so that at least you have written down somewhere a set of ground rules or you make it clear what you're comfortable with. You also don't need to be best friends with them, but as long as you get along with each other and you are able to live with each other, then things should be okay. My next piece of advice would be to join student groups and clubs that interest you. Okay, so this is not high school anymore. Nobody cares which clubs you join, and you definitely shouldn't be doing things just because they look good on paper. Now is the time to, really find yourself and make friends with people who have similar interests as you. So, if you did Model UN in high school and that's something that you're not really interested in, then you shouldn't join that type of stuff when you get to college. For me, I'm a dancer, and so my freshman year, pretty much all I did was dance groups. I was on 3 dance teams at the same time. I'm not on 3 dance teams anymore. Since then, I've joined other clubs. So I go to like NSBE meetings sometimes, and also I'll occasionally go to the Black Student Organization meetings at my school. Like I said before, this is not high school anymore. Don't join clubs that you're not actually interested in just because you think it'll look good on your resume or something like that later on, because you're in college now, nobody cares. That's gonna be your #1 way to make friends, in my opinion. Sometimes it can be difficult to make friends with people who are in your actual academic classes, so clubs and student groups are typically the next best thing. And the bonus to that is if you join a student group that's related to something that you're interested in, so like for me, a dance group, you automatically know that everybody else in that group is gonna have at least one thing in common with you. My next tip is upperclassmen want to help you. Please, 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 please. I know that sometimes upperclassmen can be daunting and intimidating to talk to, but I promise you, upperclassmen really do want to help you, and they really are your friend at the end of the day. The main reason why I say this is because upperclassmen are your biggest resource on campus. They're the people who have taken all the classes that you're going to take. They can tell you which professors are good, which professors are bad. They can tell you which dining hall is the best. They can tell you which people are cool and which people you might want to stay away from. They can literally tell you everything that you need to know about being a student at whatever school you go to. So please do not be afraid to talk to upperclassmen. I promise you, they want to help you. Even if they seem intimidating and daunting and you don't want to talk to them, they really do want to help you. That's literally the reason why I'm even making this video. I don't want people who are starting college right now to, make some of the mistakes that I made when I was a freshman and end up having a bad experience because of it. So please, 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 please reach out to upperclassmen because they really do want to help you. My next tip would be to hold off on romantic relationships. If you take anything from this video, please let it be this one. I'm speaking from experience when I say that at least during your freshman year, you might want to date later on, sophomore, junior, senior year, whatever, but freshman year, I promise you, it is not worth it to date anyone for multiple reasons. One is because you're probably not gonna have time to appropriately invest yourself in any sort of romantic relationship. You're gonna have class, you're gonna go to office hours, like I said earlier, you might have a job, you're gonna have student groups, you're gonna have to find time to do your homework. So all of that stuff takes up most of your day. 9 times out of 10, you won't have time to, actually spend quality alone time or leisure time with your significant other if you decide to be in a relationship. Another reason why I say that is because, honestly, in my opinion, college is one of those times where people are finding themselves, and I honestly don't think your freshman year is enough time for you to really get to know someone. I have found that I've dated 2 people so far in college, and both of them turned out to be very different people than who I thought they were when we started dating. Again, you can date people later on, but your freshman year is generally just not enough time for you to get to know these people on a deep enough level for you to decide whether or not you want to date them. Because people lie and people hide things, and people, you know, later on in their college careers do bad things. So, you know, I would just hold off on that for freshman year at least. Hard pass, definitely no, please, just don't do it, please. My next tip would be to make sure that you make time for yourself. So freshman year can be a really overwhelming time for most people. I really think that making time for yourself in one way or another, whatever that means to you, can be something that's really helpful. I definitely found myself being extremely overwhelmed during my freshman year between classes, social life, my dance teams. I was just really overwhelmed, and I didn't make enough time for myself. And I think that had I made more time for myself, I would have been less overwhelmed and would have been able to deal with the stress of it all a little bit better. So, like I said, whatever making time for yourself means to you is what you should do. For some people, that can be going to the gym. For some people, that can be napping. For other people, that can be making time to call your family back home and talk to them. Literally, it can be whatever you want. But I promise you, making time for yourself is going to make everything about college less stressful. And it'll be a little bit easier to deal with everything when you do feel overwhelmed. My next tip would be to stay safe. Now, in the times that we're in now, it has an added meaning. So first of all, if you're going back to school this semester, I would definitely say make sure that you're following all of your campus's COVID-19 guidelines. I want this pandemic to end just as much as everybody else does, so I'm going to be following my school's COVID-19 guidelines so that hopefully this pandemic will end soon. But I recommend to everybody else, whatever your school's COVID-19 guidelines are, please follow them so that, you know, you don't get sick. The other way that I want everyone to be safe is, you know, when it comes to sex, drugs, all of that stuff, most schools typically have workshops and things like that during their freshman orientation or at the beginning of the year. And those, while they might just sound like, you know, whatever, I really do wish that more people were paying attention during those workshops, because you honestly never know when you might need to use that information. I personally have used information from those types of workshops several times during my college career, whether it was for myself or for a friend of mine who may have needed help. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Those workshops typically are the only time where you're gonna get the information handed to you that way. So I think it's best that you really pay attention during those times, because like I said before, you never know when you're gonna need that information. And it could be for yourself, it could be for a friend, it could be for someone that you've never met before. But knowing how to get in contact with certain resources and things like that can be really useful throughout your college career. My last tip would be to make sure that you have fun. I really do hope that you follow all the tips that I mentioned before, but at the end of the day, you know, 20, 30 years after you graduate from college, nobody's gonna care what your GPA was, nobody's gonna care what clubs you joined. What will matter is the stories that you're able to tell and the experiences that you were able to have, the lessons that you learned from all the experiences that you were able to have in college. And so at the end of the day, even if you do follow all of those tips, even if you are following all of the tips that I gave before, just make sure that you following them is not hindering you from having fun. But that is all the tips that I personally wanted to give, but I did ask my Instagram followers what they wanted tips on, and so now I'm gonna respond to some of those. So one person said time management and organization. So for me personally, I use Google Calendar to organize pretty much everything in my life. And if you are someone who easily forgets things, or you know, you're just really busy and you just have so much going on that you can't remember everything that you need to do, Google Calendar is something that I would really recommend to you. But any type of calendar that you can use to organize yourself is gonna be A1. So you can put your class schedule in there, you can put your work schedule in there if you have a job. If you have club meetings, you can put your club meetings in your Google Calendar. yeah, you can pretty much put everything into your Google Calendar that you have to do, and that's pretty much what I do. I always tell people, you know, if it's not in my Google Calendar, then it's not happening, because if it's not written down in there, I will definitely forget that it's going on. So I highly recommend Google Calendar. As far as assignments and things like that, I do also like to have a separate paper, like paperback planner, where I can just write down my homework assignments. Recently, I came across this TikTok though, where this girl was showing like how to set up a assignment tracker in Google Sheets or like Excel or something like that. So I think I'm gonna try that for this year, but typically what I have done in the past is use the paper planner. Another person wanted to know how it feels to go to a PWI as a person of color. So I honestly, a little backstory on me. So I went to a predominantly white high school. So transitioning from high school to Columbia actually wasn't that much of a shock for me, because I was already used to being in the minority and like being around a lot of white people. For other people, that might not be the case. And if you are in either of those situations, whether you went to a PWI for high school or not, I would say just try your best to find people who, you know, look like you on campus. So as I was saying before, student organizations are a really good way to meet people. So if you're, you know, if you're Black like me, I would say make sure you join your school's Black student organization or Black student union or whatever they might call it. Make sure that you join that, because that's going to be a good way to meet people. And then also, I'm an engineer, so my school has a National Society of Black Engineers chapter, and I'll go to their meetings sometimes. I've made friends through that. So really anything that's centered around like that identity, any student groups that are centered around that identity, I would say either join and become like a consistent member of the club, or just go to a few meetings, exchange contact information with a few people, because that's honestly how you're gonna make friends. Another person said, how do you stay true to your morals while having fun at school? Honestly, this is something that I have really struggled with. If I'm being honest, I really don't know. The best piece of advice that I could give is to, again, join student groups or find people on campus who have the same values as you. And that way you can hold each other accountable for stuff like that. So I'm not exactly sure what this person meant by morals, but if you're talking about like religiously and things like that, most schools have pretty strong religious communities, or like they'll have like a chaplain's office where you can talk to someone about your spiritual needs and things like that. Again, I don't know what they meant by morals, but I really struggled with like my religious beliefs during my 3 years of college thus far. It wasn't that they had changed or anything, it was just becoming a lot more difficult to stick to them because of the influences that I had around. But yeah, just building community in whatever way you can, because having accountability partners is honestly the only way that I have found works for things like that. Trying to do that stuff on your own really normally isn't all that successful. The last person said, figuring out classes to take if you're an undecided major or into various STEM fields. So I talked about this earlier in the video, but definitely while you have the time, make sure that you explore other majors. So I know at least for my school, you don't have to officially declare your major until the end of the first semester of your sophomore year. So you have 3 semesters basically to explore what it is that you want to major in. So I would recommend taking classes in different departments to see what it is that you want to major in while you still have the time. It is actually really valuable to figure out that you don't like something. So like for me, I found out very early on in my college career that I didn't like computer science. So that is something that I've never considered switching to, because I took a computer science class and I hated it. And so, you know, just doing things like that, taking classes that you might be curious about but you aren't really sure about, and then once you're done with the class, you can figure out, okay, maybe this is something that I might want to pursue a little bit further, or, you know, this is something that I really, really don't like. Both of those are valuable information that can help you decide your major later on. That is all the advice that I have for today's video. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions via my Instagram poll. If you are in college and you have any advice for freshmen or people starting college for the first time this semester, go ahead and make sure you drop it down in the comments. Also, drop down below in the comments what other college-related content you want to see from me. I've been thinking about doing a how I got into Columbia video where I talk about my where I talk about my high school courses that I took and extracurriculars and stuff that I did, and also doing a video where I read my essays that I submitted in my application. So if you want to see that stuff, make sure you comment down below as well. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.